thought the invitation was going to be the highlight of my summer. Looking back, it was the moment that changed my life. It happened when my best friend Craig casually tossed me a spare key and said, "You're coming with us to the beach house for 2 weeks. My parents already said yes, so don't even try to make excuses." At the time, I laughed. I had no idea that those 2 weeks would make me question everything I thought I knew about friendship, love, and Craig himself. My name is Alex, and Craig had been my best friend for almost 8 years. We met during our first year of high school after getting paired together for a history project. Somehow, that turned into lunch breaks, weekend gaming sessions, road trips, and eventually becoming the kind of friends who practically knew each other's thoughts before they were spoken. At least, that's what I thought. The problem was that Craig was the one person I could never completely figure out. He was confident without trying, funny without being obnoxious, the kind of guy who walked into a room and instantly made everyone feel comfortable. Girls loved him. Parents loved him. Teachers loved him. And annoyingly, I probably loved him too. Not that I ever planned on admitting it. For years, I had kept those feelings locked away. Craig was my best friend. That friendship mattered too much to risk. So I did what I always did. I ignored it. Most of the time, it worked. Then came the beach house. "You seriously haven't packed yet?" Craig asked as he stood in my apartment doorway. It was 6 in the morning, way too early for any human being to be awake. "I hate you," I muttered. "You love me." I rolled my eyes. Craig grinned. That stupid grin. The one that somehow made me want to punch him and smile at the same time. He stepped inside and immediately started grabbing random clothes off my couch. "Alex, we're leaving in 40 minutes. "We?" "My family and you. You know most people knock before entering someone's apartment." "You gave me a key." "Worst mistake of my life." Craig laughed. His laugh always felt genuine, never forced, never fake. That was one of the reasons people liked being around him. He made everything feel lighter, even when you were stressed, even when life was falling apart, especially then. The truth was, the previous few months had been rough. Work had been draining. My lease was ending soon, and I honestly hadn't taken a real vacation in years. Craig knew that, which was probably why he'd spent 3 weeks convincing me to come. Eventually, I gave in, mostly because saying no to Craig was nearly impossible. 3 hours later, we were on the highway heading toward the coast. Craig drove while I sat in the passenger seat. His younger sister Emily was asleep in the back seat wearing headphones. His parents were following behind us in a separate SUV packed with luggage and groceries. The ocean appeared shortly after noon. The moment we caught our first glimpse of blue water stretching toward the horizon, Craig slapped my shoulder. "There it is." I smiled, despite myself. The coastline was beautiful. Sunlight sparkled across the water. White clouds drifted lazily overhead. For the first time in months, I felt myself relax. The beach house sat on a bluff overlooking the ocean. It wasn't a mansion, but it was easily the nicest house I'd ever stayed in. Large windows, a wraparound deck, private stairs leading directly down to the beach. The kind of place you'd see in a travel magazine. Craig jumped out of the car before we even stopped completely. "Race you inside. You're 24 and winning." He sprinted toward the front door. I followed, mostly because I refused to let him win. A few minutes later, we were carrying bags upstairs. Craig pushed open a bedroom door. "This one's ours." I froze. "Ours?" "Yeah." I stared at him. He stared back. Then he frowned. What? There are 2 beds. So? You never mentioned we'd be sharing a room. Craig shrugged. There are only 4 bedrooms. My parents have one. Emily has one. My grandparents are coming next weekend and taking the guest room. I looked around. 2 twin beds sat on opposite sides of the room. A large window overlooked the ocean. Honestly, it wasn't a big deal. Still, something about hearing Craig casually say ours made my stomach do a weird little flip. Relax, he said. You act like I've never seen you sleeping before. That's because you haven't. You drool. I do not. You absolutely do. I threw a pillow at him. He caught it effortlessly, then smiled. Again, that smile, the one that always managed to linger a little longer than it should. For a second, neither of us spoke. The room suddenly felt strangely quiet. The distant sound of waves drifted through the open window. Craig looked away first. Come on, he said. My mom's making lunch. The moment passed, or at least I thought it did, because later that evening, after dinner, after unpacking, after watching the sunset from the deck, something happened that made me start wondering if this trip might be different from every other trip we'd ever taken. Craig and I were walking along the beach alone. The sun had disappeared. The sky glowed orange and purple. The sand was cool beneath our feet. We talked about nothing important. Movies, work, old memories, the usual. Then, Craig suddenly got quiet. Not unusual for most people. Very unusual for him. I glanced over. You okay? He kept looking at the waves. Yeah. That answer came too quickly. I knew him well enough to notice. Craig. He sighed. What? What's wrong? For several seconds he didn't answer. Then he looked at me. Not past me, not toward me, directly at me. And there was something in his expression I couldn't quite read. Something serious. Something I'd never seen before. Finally, he spoke. Alex, can I ask you something? Sure. He hesitated. The ocean crashed softly against the shore. My pulse started speeding up for reasons I couldn't explain. Craig swallowed. Then he asked a question that instantly changed the entire trip. Have you ever wondered what would have happened if we'd met at a different point in our lives? Craig's question caught me completely off guard. For a moment, I honestly thought I'd misheard him. The waves rolled onto the shore. A cold breeze drifted off the ocean. And Craig just stood there looking at me, waiting. What kind of question is that? I finally asked. He shrugged. I don't know. That's not an answer. I know. I laughed nervously. Okay, then what do you mean? Craig kicked at the sand. The confident guy who could talk to anyone suddenly seemed unsure of himself. It was strange. Honestly, it made me uneasy. Because if Craig was nervous, then whatever was on his mind mattered. A different point in our lives, he repeated quietly. Like, if we met now instead of when we were 16. I frowned. Why are you thinking about that? He looked toward the water again. I was just curious. Liar. That earned a small smile. You know me too well. Unfortunately. Craig laughed softly. Then he grew serious again. I guess I've just been thinking about how different everything would have been. I didn't know how to respond to that. Because if I was being honest, I'd thought about it before, more than once, especially during college, especially during the years when my feelings for him became impossible to ignore. What if we hadn't started as friends? What if I met him now? Would I have immediately fallen for him? Probably. Would it have hurt less? Definitely not. The problem was that I couldn't tell him any of that, so I kept things safe. Well, I said, we probably wouldn't be best friends. Craig looked surprised. No? I shook my head. No way. Why not? Because at 16 you were annoying. His jaw dropped. I was not. You absolutely were. I was charming. You were a disaster. Craig laughed loudly. A couple walking farther down the beach glanced our way. You loved me. I tolerated you. Same thing. We continued walking. The tension eased, at least for a little while. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that there had been something else behind his question, something he hadn't said, something he'd stopped himself from saying. By the time we returned to the house, the sky was completely dark. Lights glowed from the deck. Music drifted through open windows. Craig's parents were playing cards with Emily in the living room. His mom immediately pointed at us. There you two are. Craig groaned. What now? Dessert, his mom smiled. I made pie. Never mind. Craig grabbed a plate. I love you. Funny how quickly that changed. Food had always been Craig's weakness. The rest of the evening passed easily. We played cards, watched a movie, laughed about old memories. It felt normal, comfortable, exactly what I needed. Around midnight, everyone finally headed to bed. I changed into a t-shirt and shorts before climbing into my bed. Craig was brushing his teeth in the bathroom. When he returned a few minutes later, I nearly dropped my phone. Not because he was doing anything inappropriate, just because he was shirtless, which shouldn't have mattered. We'd gone swimming together countless times, spent years changing in locker rooms. None of that was new. Yet suddenly I was very aware that we'd be sleeping in the same room for the next 2 weeks. Craig flopped onto his bed. Long day. Yeah. For several minutes, neither of us spoke. The room was dark except for moonlight spilling through the window. Outside, the ocean continued its endless rhythm. Then Craig suddenly laughed. What? I was just remembering sophomore year. I groaned. No. Oh, yes. Absolutely not. The camping trip. I covered my face. Please stop. Craig was already laughing too hard. You screamed because you thought a raccoon was attacking you. It was dark. It was a squirrel. It sounded aggressive. You jumped into the lake. It was self-defense. Craig laughed even harder. His laugh filled the room, and before I realized it, I was laughing too. That was the thing about him. No matter how bad life got, Craig somehow made everything feel easier. Eventually, the laughter faded. Silence returned. I stared at the ceiling. The sound of waves drifted through the open window. Then I heard Craig's voice. Alex? Yeah? You know you're my best friend, right? My chest tightened unexpectedly. Of course. I mean it. Something about the way he said it felt important, careful, like he wanted to make sure I understood. I turned toward him. In the darkness, I could barely make out his silhouette. Yeah, I said quietly. I know. He didn't answer immediately. When he finally spoke, his voice sounded different, softer. Good. That should have been the end of the conversation. Instead, Neither of us went to sleep. Minutes stretched by, then an hour. At some point, I rolled onto my side. When I looked across the room, I realized Craig was still awake too. Our eyes met. Neither of us looked away. The moment lasted only a few seconds, but it felt longer, much longer. Eventually, Craig broke the silence. Can't sleep? No. Me neither. Too much pie. He laughed. Probably, but neither of us sounded convinced. The next morning, I woke to shouting. Specifically, Emily shouting. I sat up groggily. Craig groaned from across the room. What time is it? Too early. The door burst open. Emily appeared, carrying a volleyball. Beach day. Craig pulled a pillow over his face. Go away. His sister ignored him. Mom said everyone has to come. Tell Mom I died. She said, nice try. I couldn't help laughing. Craig pointed at me. Traitor. Half an hour later, we were all walking toward the beach. The weather was perfect. Blue skies, warm sun, just enough wind. Families filled the shoreline. Kids chased waves. Seagulls circled overhead. It felt like something from a vacation commercial. Craig and I joined a volleyball game with a few people staying in nearby houses. Predictably, he got competitive immediately. Alex, I'm right here. Try harder. It's a friendly game. There is no such thing. An hour later, we were both covered in sand, sweaty, exhausted, and laughing. I hadn't felt this relaxed in years. Then something unexpected happened. During a break between games, a guy around our age walked over. Tall, athletic, dark hair, the kind of person who looked effortlessly attractive. He smiled at me. Nice save back there. I blinked. Oh, thanks. I'm Ryan. Alex. We shook hands. Ryan stayed beside me. The conversation flowed easily. Nothing unusual. Just casual beach talk. Where are you from? How long are you staying? Stuff like that. But after a few minutes, I noticed something. Craig had gone completely quiet. When I glanced over, he was watching us. Not smiling, not joking, watching. The expression on his face caught me off guard. Because Craig didn't look annoyed. He looked upset. The feeling disappeared the second he noticed me looking. His usual grin returned instantly. But I'd seen it. And for the rest of the afternoon, one question kept bouncing around inside my head. Why did my best friend seem bothered by another guy talking to me? I told myself I was imagining things. Craig wasn't jealous. That was ridiculous. He was my best friend. Best friends didn't get jealous because someone spent 10 minutes talking to each other on a beach, right? Still, the look I'd caught on his face lingered in my mind. The rest of the afternoon felt different. Not bad, just different. Ryan ended up joining our volleyball group, and everyone got along well enough. He was funny, easy to talk to, the kind of guy who made friends quickly. Normally, Craig would have clicked with someone like that immediately. Instead, he seemed distracted. Every time Ryan started a conversation with me, I noticed Craig glancing over, then looking away, then pretending he wasn't paying attention. It was weird. By sunset, everyone started heading back toward their houses. Ryan walked beside me as we packed up. Some of us are having a bonfire tomorrow night, he said, down by the south end of the beach. Sounds fun. You should come. Before I could answer, a familiar voice appeared behind me. We'll be there. Ryan turned. Craig had somehow materialized out of nowhere. Ryan smiled. Cool. Craig smiled back. The smile looked perfectly friendly. Maybe too friendly. See you tomorrow. After Ryan left, I glanced at Craig. What was that? What? You answered for me. Craig shrugged. You were obviously going. How do you know that? He smirked. Because you're boring. Excuse me? If I don't force you to socialize, you'll spend 2 weeks reading books on the deck. That sounds amazing. Exactly my point. I rolled my eyes. Craig laughed. But even then, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. That night, his parents decided to have dinner on the deck. The ocean stretched endlessly beyond the railing. The sky turned pink and gold. Everything felt peaceful. Emily was telling a story about school. Craig's mom was laughing. His dad was grilling burgers. Normal family stuff. The kind of thing I'd always secretly envied. My own family wasn't close. Not like this. Not effortless. Not comfortable. Craig noticed me staring. What? Nothing. You're doing the thing. What thing? The thinking thing. I sighed. I was just saying your family is nice. His expression softened immediately. You know you're basically family too, right? His mom pointed a fork at me. Exactly. His dad nodded. You're stuck with us. Emily groaned dramatically. Great. Another Craig. I laughed. But something warm settled in my chest. Because they meant it. They always had. I spent so much time with their family growing up that sometimes it felt like I belonged there. Maybe that was why my feelings for Craig had become so complicated. He wasn't just my best friend. He was tied to some of my happiest memories. Losing him would mean losing all of that, which was exactly why I never planned to tell him how I felt. Ever. The next morning started with rain. Heavy rain. The kind that rattled against windows and turned the ocean gray. Craig was thrilled, which made absolutely no sense. Why are you happy about this? He grinned from the couch. Movie day. We can watch movies anytime. Not beach house movies. What's the difference? Atmosphere. I threw a pillow at him. He caught it. Again. Annoyingly. Most of the day was spent indoors. Board games, movies, snacks. The weather never improved. By late afternoon, everyone was getting restless, especially Craig. Around 5 o'clock, he wandered into our room while I was reading. Come with me. No. You don't even know where we're going. I don't care. Craig grabbed my book. I immediately reached for it. Give that back. Come with me first. Craig. Alex. I glared. He grinned. Unfortunately, I already knew who would win this argument. 20 minutes later, we were walking through light rain along a path behind the house. Where are we going? It's a surprise. I hate surprises. No, you don't. I absolutely do. Craig ignored me. The trail eventually climbed onto a rocky overlook. The ocean spread beneath us. Huge waves crashed against cliffs. Mist drifted through the air. Even with the rain, it was beautiful. I stopped walking. Okay. Craig folded his arms. Okay, what? This is worth leaving the house for. Told you. For several minutes, we simply stood there, watching the ocean, listening to the wind. The world felt strangely quiet. Then Craig spoke. "You remember graduation?" I glanced at him. Of course. That night, after the party, my stomach tightened unexpectedly. I remembered very clearly, because it had been one of the hardest nights of my life. Everyone had been celebrating, talking about the future, college, moving away, new lives. Meanwhile, I spent the entire evening realizing I was hopelessly in love with my best friend. "Yeah," I said carefully. "What about it?" Craig stared toward the horizon. "There was something I almost told you." My pulse immediately sped up. "What?" For a second I thought he might actually say it. Whatever had been bothering him, whatever he kept dancing around. But then he laughed softly. "Never mind." I groaned. "Oh, come on. It's not important." "Then why bring it up?" Craig smiled. "No reason. I wanted to push. I wanted answers. Instead, I let it go. Mostly because I wasn't sure I wanted to hear them." The rain finally stopped around sunset. By nightfall, the beach bonfire was back on. Music drifted across the sand. A dozen people gathered around a large fire pit. Someone brought speakers. Someone else brought snacks. The atmosphere was relaxed and easy. Ryan immediately waved us over. "Alex," Craig rolled his eyes. "Guess he likes you." I laughed. "Relax." "I'm relaxed." "You don't sound relaxed." "I'm extremely relaxed." "Sure." Ryan ended up sitting beside me near the fire. The conversation flowed naturally. At one point, he asked if I wanted to grab coffee sometime before I left town. A simple question. A normal question. The kind of question most people wouldn't think twice about. But before I could answer, I noticed Craig standing farther down the beach, alone, watching the ocean. For some reason, he looked miserable. Not angry, not annoyed, miserable. The sight hit me harder than it should have. Ryan was still talking. I barely heard him, because all I could think about was Craig. Eventually, I excused myself and walked over. He didn't turn around when I approached. "Hey. Hey. You okay?" "Yeah." Lie. Definitely a lie. I stepped beside him. The fire glowed behind us. Music drifted through the darkness. The ocean stretched endlessly ahead. Then Craig surprised me. "Did you say yes?" I blinked. "To what?" "The coffee." For a moment, I just stared at him. Then realization hit. Ryan. Craig was asking about Ryan, and suddenly everything felt very strange. "Not yet," I said. Craig nodded. His jaw tightened slightly. "Okay." I looked at him carefully. "Why do you care?" For the first time all night, he met my eyes. The expression on his face made my heart skip, because there was something there, something raw, something vulnerable, something I'd never seen before. And when he finally answered, his voice was barely above a whisper. "I don't know. I don't know." 3 simple words, but hearing them from Craig felt like getting hit by a wave I hadn't seen coming. We stood there in silence. The bonfire crackled behind us. Music drifted across the beach. People laughed somewhere in the darkness. Yet it felt like none of that existed anymore. Just me and Craig. Just that strange conversation. Finally, I spoke. "You don't know?" Craig rubbed the back of his neck, a nervous habit he'd had for years. Forget it. No, Alex, you brought it up. He sighed heavily. I know. I waited. For once, I wasn't going to let him dodge the conversation. He stared out at the ocean for several seconds, then finally said, maybe I just don't like seeing things change. The answer sounded rehearsed, safe, like he'd chosen it carefully. What things? He laughed quietly. Everything. I frowned. That's not specific. I know. You're impossible. Also true. Normally, that would have ended with both of us laughing. This time it didn't. The tension stayed. Eventually, Craig glanced back toward the fire. You should go talk to Ryan. The words surprised me. What? He seems into you. My heart skipped. Not because of Ryan, because of the way Craig said it. Like forcing the words out hurt. I stared at him. You think so? Craig shrugged. Pretty obvious. The strange thing was that he didn't sound happy about it. At all. Before I could say anything else, he started walking back toward the bonfire, leaving me standing alone beside the ocean. The rest of the night felt weird. Ryan was still friendly, still interested, but I found myself distracted. Every few minutes I looked toward Craig. Every time I did, I caught him looking away. It happened so often that eventually I stopped believing it was coincidence. Around midnight, everyone started heading home. The beach emptied. The fire died down. The walk back to the house felt unusually quiet. Craig walked beside me with his hands in his pockets. Neither of us spoke much. Something had shifted. I just couldn't figure out what. Back at the house, everyone was already asleep. The lights were off. The only sound came from waves outside. Craig stopped at our bedroom door. Night. Night. He disappeared inside. For several minutes I remained in the hallway, thinking, trying to understand him, trying to understand myself, and failing at both. The next few days settled into an odd routine. Nothing dramatic happened, but the atmosphere between us kept changing. Little things started standing out, things I'd never noticed before, like how Craig always sat beside me during meals, how he'd casually throw an arm around my shoulders when we watched movies, how he always found some excuse to pull me away from larger groups. Individually, none of it meant anything. Together, I wasn't so sure anymore. Then came Thursday, the day everything got more complicated. It started with a kayaking trip. Craig's dad rented equipment for everyone. The weather was perfect, the ocean calm, the sky clear. We spent most of the morning paddling along the coastline, exploring small coves and rocky inlets. At one point, we became separated from the others. Not far, just enough that we were alone. Craig floated beside me, the kayaks drifting gently on the water. This is nice. I nodded. Yeah. For a while, neither of us spoke. The ocean stretched endlessly around us. Peaceful. Quiet. Then Craig surprised me. You never answered. I looked over. Answered what? The coffee. Ryan again. Of course. I laughed softly. You're still thinking about that? His expression remained serious. Maybe. I studied him. The sunlight reflected off the water. His face looked unreadable, but his eyes didn't. There was something there, something he was trying very hard to hide. No, I finally said. His eyebrows lifted slightly. No? I didn't say yes. Craig looked away immediately, but not before I caught it. Relief. Pure relief. My pulse quickened. Why are you smiling? His head snapped back toward me. I'm not. You absolutely are. I'm literally not. You are. Craig rolled his eyes, but the smile remained, and somehow that made my chest feel warm. The rest of the kayaking trip passed quickly, yet I couldn't stop thinking about that reaction. Relief. Not curiosity, not amusement. Relief. Why? That question followed me all afternoon, and by evening, I still didn't have an answer. Later that night, a storm rolled in. Not a dangerous one, just heavy rain and strong wind. The kind of weather that makes old beach houses creak. Everyone gathered in the living room. Movies played. Blankets appeared. Snacks disappeared almost immediately. At some point, Emily fell asleep on the couch. Craig's parents headed upstairs, leaving just me and Craig. The storm rattled the windows. Lightning flashed outside. The room glowed briefly white, then dark again. Craig glanced toward me. You tired? Not really. Good. I smiled. Good? He nodded. Let's go outside. I stared at him. During a storm? Exactly. You're insane. Probably. 10 minutes later, we were standing beneath the covered deck. Rain poured from the roof. Wind whipped across the ocean. The entire coastline looked wild and beautiful. Craig leaned against the railing. His hair moved in the wind. For some reason, I couldn't stop looking at him. The moment felt strangely intimate, like we were sharing something private, something important. Neither of us spoke for a while. The storm did all the talking. Then Craig broke the silence. Can I tell you something? My stomach tightened immediately. Sure. His expression grew serious, more serious than I'd ever seen. For several seconds, he said nothing, like he was gathering courage. Then finally, the deck door suddenly opened. Emily stepped outside. Mom says, stop being weird and come eat brownies. Craig immediately groaned. I burst out laughing. The moment shattered. Gone. Just like that. Emily looked between us suspiciously. What? Nothing, Craig muttered. You're both acting strange. We're not. You totally are. She pointed dramatically, then disappeared back inside. I was still laughing when I looked at Craig. He wasn't laughing. Instead, he was staring at me, a look in his eyes that made my breath catch. Not friendship, not exactly. Something deeper. Something I'd spent years secretly hoping to see. And for one impossible second, I wondered if maybe, just maybe, I wasn't the only one keeping secrets. That look stayed with me, long after the brownies, long after the storm ended, long after everyone went to bed. I couldn't stop thinking about it. Maybe I was reading too much into things. Maybe I wanted to believe something was there. After all, I'd spent years wishing Craig felt the same way I did. It would be easy to mistake hope for reality. Still, something had changed, and I knew Craig felt it too. That night, neither of us slept much. I noticed him turning over in bed several times. Every now and then, moonlight from the window would illuminate part of the room, enough for me to see he was awake. Around 2 in the morning, I finally gave up trying to sleep. I sat up. Craig immediately looked over. "Can't sleep?" I laughed softly. "Apparently not." "Same." For a moment, neither of us moved. Then Craig sat up too. The room was quiet except for the ocean outside. The darkness somehow made everything feel more honest, less guarded. "Alex?" "Yeah?" His voice sounded uncertain. "I've been trying to tell you something all week." My pulse instantly sped up. "What is it?" Craig looked down at his hands, something I had never seen him do before. He was nervous, actually nervous, and suddenly I realized how rare that was. Craig wasn't afraid of public speaking, wasn't afraid of confrontation, wasn't afraid of anything. Yet right now, he looked terrified. "I don't know how to say it." My chest tightened. "Just say it." He laughed quietly. "Easier said than done." I waited. The silence stretched. Seconds felt like minutes. Then footsteps echoed in the hallway. Craig immediately looked away. The moment vanished. A second later, his dad walked past our room toward the kitchen. The timing couldn't have been worse. Craig groaned. I dropped backward onto my pillow. Seriously? Seriously. For the next several minutes, we both laughed. Mostly because if we didn't laugh, we might have screamed. Eventually, we fell asleep, still without answers. The following day was the warmest yet. The storm had completely cleared. The ocean sparkled beneath bright blue skies. Everyone decided to spend the afternoon on the beach, including Ryan. The second he appeared, Emily smirked at me. I immediately knew trouble was coming. Oh no. Oh yes. "Emily," she grinned, "your boyfriend is here." Across the beach, Ryan waved. I buried my face in my hands. Craig nearly choked on his drink. His sister looked delighted. "Boyfriend?" "He's not my boyfriend. Yet." "Emily." She laughed and ran away before I could respond. Craig was still trying not to laugh. "Don't." "I'm not. You are." His grin immediately gave him away. "Okay, maybe a little." I threw a towel at him. He laughed harder. The weird thing was that neither of us seemed upset anymore. The tension from the previous night hadn't disappeared. If anything, it had grown stronger. But now there was something else too. Comfort. Like we were both slowly approaching a conversation neither of us knew how to start. Ryan joined us for volleyball later. Things were normal, easy. Yet I noticed something interesting. The more Ryan talked to me, the more distant I felt. Not because he wasn't attractive, he was. Not because he wasn't nice, he definitely was. The problem was simple. He wasn't Craig. And apparently, that mattered more than I wanted to admit. A lot more. Late that afternoon, everyone returned to the house for dinner. Ryan headed back to his family's rental. Before leaving, he stopped beside me. Hey, you free tomorrow?" I hesitated. Not because I needed to think, because I already knew my answer. "Sorry." Ryan smiled politely. "No?" I shook my head. "No." To his credit, he handled it well. No worries. Then he laughed. For what it's worth, I kind of figured. My eyebrows rose. You did? Ryan glanced toward the deck, toward Craig, who happened to be watching us. Again. Then Ryan looked back at me. Yeah. My stomach dropped. Before I could ask what he meant, he waved goodbye and walked away, leaving me standing there, completely confused. That evening, Craig seemed happier than he'd been all week, which definitely didn't help my growing suspicions. We spent most of dinner laughing, talking, telling old stories. Everything felt easy again, natural, almost like we were the only two people at the table. After dinner, Emily announced she wanted to watch a movie. Craig's parents agreed. Everyone settled into the living room. Halfway through the movie, Emily fell asleep. Then Craig's mom. Then his dad. Eventually, the entire room became quiet. The movie continued playing. No one watched it. I glanced toward Craig. He was already looking at me. Neither of us looked away. A strange electricity passed between us, the kind that had become impossible to ignore. Finally, Craig stood. Walk? I nodded immediately. We slipped outside. The night air felt cool against my skin. The beach was almost empty. Just moonlight, waves, and us. We walked without speaking. The ocean reflected silver beneath the stars. Everything felt calm. Until Craig stopped. I almost walked into him. What? He turned around. His expression made my heart start pounding. This wasn't casual. This wasn't friendly conversation. Whatever he wanted to say, he was finally going to say it. Alex. The way he said my name sent a shiver through me. My throat suddenly felt dry. What? For several seconds, he simply stared at me. Then he laughed nervously, a sound I had never heard from him before. God. What? I had this whole speech planned. Despite my nerves, I smiled. A speech? Yeah. That's concerning. Craig rubbed his face, then looked directly at me, and everything else disappeared. The beach, the ocean, the stars, all of it faded away because of the expression in his eyes. Because suddenly I knew. I didn't know exactly what he was about to say, but I knew it would change everything. And judging by the way his hands were shaking slightly, Craig knew it too. My heart was pounding so hard, I was convinced Craig could hear it. We stood there in the moonlight. The waves rolled onto the shore behind him. The ocean breeze moved through his hair. And for the first time since I'd met him, Craig looked completely unsure of himself. It was strangely adorable and terrifying, because if he was nervous, then whatever came next mattered. A lot. You had a speech? I asked. Craig groaned. Don't make fun of me. I haven't even heard it yet. Trust me, it's bad. I couldn't help smiling. Now I definitely want to hear it. He laughed softly, then looked down at the sand. For several seconds he didn't speak. When he finally did, his voice was quieter than usual. Do you remember when we first met? The question surprised me. History class. Yeah. You forgot your half of the project. Craig pointed at me. That is not what happened. That's exactly what happened. I was busy. You forgot. I was busy forgetting. I laughed. Craig smiled too, but only briefly. The seriousness returned almost immediately. I remember walking in the class that day. His eyes met mine, and thinking you looked like someone I'd probably end up being friends with. I felt my chest tighten. Craig continued. Then we started hanging out. A small smile appeared. Then suddenly, 8 years went by. The ocean crashed against the shore. Neither of us moved. I always thought we'd have more time. I frowned. More time for what? Craig swallowed. And just like that, the nervousness returned. The hesitation, the uncertainty, the fear. Then he finally said it. To figure things out. My pulse accelerated. Figure what out? His eyes stayed locked on mine. The answer seemed obvious now. Painfully obvious. Yet neither of us could quite say it. Not yet. Craig laughed nervously again. You know, for a guy who's supposed to be smart, you're making this really difficult. My stomach flipped, because suddenly I wasn't nervous anymore. I knew. I absolutely knew. And I think he realized I knew too. The silence stretched between us. Neither of us looked away. Then Craig took a slow breath. Alex. Yeah? His voice dropped lower. I think. He stopped. Started again. I think somewhere along the way, you stopped being just my best friend. My entire world seemed to freeze. The ocean, the wind, everything, gone. Only Craig remained. Only his voice. Only those words. He looked terrified after saying them, like he'd just stepped off a cliff, like he wasn't sure whether I'd catch him. For years I had imagined this moment, dreamed about it, convinced myself it would never happen. And now it was real. Actually real. Craig stared at me, waiting. The poor guy looked like he might pass out. Say something. I laughed softly, not because it was funny, because I couldn't believe this was happening. What do you want me to say? I don't know. His voice cracked slightly. I've never done this before. That somehow made me love him even more. I stepped closer, only a little, but enough. Craig. He immediately looked up. Yeah? You are the dumbest person I've ever met. His eyes widened. What? I smiled. Do you have any idea how long I've been waiting for you to figure this out? For 1 second, he just stared. Then another. Then another. And suddenly realization hit him. Hard. Oh. I nodded. Oh. Wait. His jaw dropped. Wait. I started laughing. Now I couldn't stop. The expression on his face was priceless. You mean? Yes. For how long? I folded my arms. I'm not answering that. Alex. No. Alex. Absolutely not. Craig stared at me, then shook his head. Years. I looked away, which was apparently all the confirmation he needed. Years, he repeated. Oh my God. I pointed at him. You don't get to judge me. I'm not judging you. You're smiling. Because you're ridiculous. You're one to talk. He laughed. I laughed. And somehow all the tension of the past week disappeared, replaced by relief. Pure relief. Eventually the laughter faded. The moment became quiet again. Different this time. Better. Craig stepped a little closer. Close enough that my pulse started misbehaving again. Neither of us seemed interested in moving away. I really thought you didn't feel the same way. I shook my head. I thought exactly the same thing. Craig smiled. Guess we're both idiots. Definitely. The moonlight reflected in his eyes. And suddenly, everything felt simple. Not complicated. Not scary. Simple. The way it should have been years ago. I have another confession. I raised an eyebrow. There's more? Unfortunately. I laughed. Craig rubbed the back of his neck. I hated Ryan. That caught me off guard. You hated Ryan? I didn't actually hate him. You just looked like you did. He groaned. It was embarrassing. I laughed harder. You were jealous. No, you absolutely were. Craig sighed dramatically. Fine. The words sounded painful. Maybe a little. A little? A lot. I nearly doubled over laughing. The look on his face only made it worse. This isn't funny. It absolutely is. Alex, you were jealous of a guy I barely knew. You don't understand. Craig smiled sheepishly. I was losing my mind. That warm feeling returned to my chest, stronger than ever. For years, I thought I was carrying those feelings alone. Now I knew I wasn't. That was the best feeling in the world. Craig stepped closer again. Neither of us spoke. Neither of us needed to. The distance between us felt smaller than ever. And for the first time since arriving at the beach house, there were no more secrets left between us. Just one final step neither of us seemed quite brave enough to take yet. For a long moment, neither of us moved. The ocean stretched endlessly behind Craig. Moonlight reflected across the water. And somehow, after years of wondering, years of overthinking, years of convincing myself nothing would ever happen, I was standing here with the one person I'd wanted all along. It still didn't feel real. Craig laughed quietly. You have no idea how much better this went in my head. I smiled. Oh, really? Yeah. What happened in the imaginary version? You immediately confessed your undying love. I rolled my eyes. Naturally. And then I looked cool. That's the most unrealistic part. Craig groaned. See, this is why I was nervous. I couldn't stop smiling. Neither could he. For the first time all week, everything felt easy. No guessing, no wondering, no trying to decode every glance and conversation. Just honesty. Finally. We started walking again, slowly this time. Neither of us seemed eager to return to the house. The beach was nearly empty. Only the sound of waves accompanied us. Can I ask something? Craig said. Depends. That's not how questions work. Ask anyway. He looked down at the sand. When did it happen? I already knew what he meant. When did I start liking you? Craig nodded. I laughed softly. I honestly don't know. That's helpful. I'm serious. For a moment, I thought about it, trying to find the exact point, the exact memory, the exact moment friendship became something more. I think it happened gradually. Craig listened quietly. Like one day you just realize someone's become the first person you want to tell everything to. His expression softened. The first person you call. The first person you look for. I smiled. And then one day, you realize you're in trouble. Craig laughed. That's pretty much exactly what happened to me. That made my heart do something stupid. Again. The next hour disappeared surprisingly fast. We talked, really talked, about everything we'd never said before. The near confessions, the moments we'd misread, the years of assuming the other person couldn't possibly feel the same way. At one point, Craig actually stopped walking. You know what makes me angry? What? You rejected Ryan. I blinked. What? He pointed at me dramatically. If you'd said yes to that coffee, I would have spent the rest of my life regretting it. I burst out laughing. Craig tried to look serious, failed immediately. Eventually, we headed back toward the house. The lights were off. Everyone was asleep. The vacation home looked peaceful against the dark coastline. We stopped near the deck stairs. Neither of us seemed eager to go inside. Craig leaned against the railing. So, a smile appeared. We're really doing this? I laughed. Doing what? This. He gestured between us. The smile on his face was impossible to ignore. For the first time since I'd met him, Craig looked genuinely happy. Not the usual outgoing version of happy. Something deeper. Something calmer. I probably looked exactly the same. I think we are. His smile widened. Good. The word came out so quietly that I almost missed it. For a few seconds, we simply stood there. Comfortable silence. The kind we'd always shared. Except now it felt different. Warmer. More meaningful. Like we'd finally stopped pretending. Eventually, Craig sighed. We should probably go inside. Probably. Neither of us moved. Craig laughed. We're terrible at this. Apparently. Another few seconds passed. Then he shook his head. Come on. We headed upstairs. The hallway was dark. The entire house silent. When we reached our room, Craig stopped in the doorway. I turned toward him. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then he smiled. A genuine smile. The kind I'd seen thousands of times before. Yet somehow it felt completely new. Good night, Alex. Good night, Craig. I climbed into bed. He did the same. The room became quiet. Moonlight spilled through the window. Outside, the ocean continued its endless rhythm. For the first time all week, sleep came easily. But before I drifted off, I heard Craig's voice from across the room. Soft, almost amused. Wish I'd figured this out sooner. I smiled into the darkness. Me too. And somehow, despite everything we'd missed, everything we'd almost lost by staying silent for so long, neither of us sounded sad. Because we still had tomorrow. And for the first time, tomorrow looked very different than either of us had imagined. The next morning, I woke up before everyone else. For a few seconds, I just lay there staring at the ceiling, listening to the waves, listening to the quiet. Then I remembered, and immediately smiled. It hadn't been a dream. The conversation on the beach, the confessions, everything. It had actually happened. Across the room, Craig was still asleep. For once, he looked completely peaceful. No overthinking, no nervousness, no hidden feelings. Just Craig. My Craig. The thought made my heart feel ridiculously light. A few minutes later, he opened one eye, then the other. When he saw me looking at him, a slow smile spread across his face. Morning. Morning. Neither of us could stop smiling, which was honestly becoming a problem. We look insane. Craig laughed. Probably. We should act normal. Definitely. 5 minutes later, we walked downstairs, immediately smiling again. Emily noticed first. Of course she did. Her eyes narrowed suspiciously. What happened? Craig froze. Nothing. That's a lie. His mother looked up from her coffee. What is? Emily pointed dramatically. Them. I nearly choked. Craig looked horrified. Emily, they're being weird. His dad glanced between us, then shrugged. They've always been weird. Good point, his mom agreed. Thankfully, breakfast continued before Emily could investigate further. Craig and I exchanged relieved looks. Neither of us trusted his sister for a second. The final few days at the beach house became some of the happiest days of my life. Not because everything suddenly changed. Actually, it was the opposite. Most things stayed exactly the same. We still walked the beach, still watched movies, still played volleyball, still laughed about stupid things. The difference was that now there were no secrets hiding beneath everything. No wondering, no pretending, no fear, just honesty. And it felt incredible. One afternoon, Craig and I sat alone on the deck watching the ocean. The sun was beginning to set. Orange light reflected across the water. The view was beautiful. But honestly, I barely noticed. Because Craig was sitting beside me. And after everything we'd finally admitted, that somehow felt more important. You know, he said. What? My family is going to lose their minds. I laughed. They're definitely going to figure it out. They probably already have. That possibility was genuinely terrifying. Emily, especially. She had the instincts of a detective, a dangerous detective. Almost as if summoned by our conversation, the deck door opened. Emily stepped outside. Craig immediately groaned. There she is. The criminal. I heard that. She sat down across from us, then stared, and stared, and kept staring. Finally, I pointed. Why are you looking at us like that? Emily folded her arms. Because I figured it out. Craig nearly fell out of his chair. My stomach dropped. What? She smiled, the most smug smile I'd ever seen. You guys are idiots. Craig buried his face in his hands. Oh no. Oh yes. Emily laughed. I've been waiting for years. Craig slowly looked up. Years? You weren't subtle. We absolutely were. She laughed so hard she almost dropped her drink. That answered that. Apparently, we had not been subtle. At all. The final night arrived faster than neither of us wanted. Suitcases sat packed near the front door. The vacation was ending. Tomorrow, we'd head home. Back to real life. Back to work. Back to responsibilities. But somehow, that didn't bother me. Because for the first time, I wasn't going back alone. Late that evening, Craig and I walked down to the beach one last time. The shoreline was quiet. The same place where everything had finally changed. The same place where years of uncertainty ended. We stopped near the water, watching waves roll onto the sand. I don't want this trip to end. Craig's voice sounded almost disappointed. It doesn't have to. He looked over. What do you mean? I smiled. The beach trip is ending. I nudged his shoulder. Not us. For a moment, he simply stared. Then his expression softened. That look again. The one that made my chest tighten every single time. You're really cheesy sometimes. I laughed. You're welcome. Craig shook his head, but he was smiling. The ocean breeze moved through his hair. Moonlight reflected across the water. The entire moment felt perfect. Not because it was dramatic. Not because it was some unbelievable fantasy. Because it was real. Because after all those years, I was standing beside my best friend. The person who knew me better than anyone. The person I had trusted longer than almost anyone else in my life. And somehow, impossibly, He felt the same way. We stayed there until long after midnight, talking about the future, about plans, about everything we'd missed. When we finally headed back toward the house, I glanced over at him. "Hey, Craig?" "Yeah?" I smiled. "Thanks for inviting me." He laughed softly, then shook his head. "No." "What?" He looked out toward the beach house glowing in the distance, toward the ocean, toward the place where everything had changed, and then back at me. His smile was warm, genuine, the same smile that had made me fall for him years ago. "Thanks for coming." And somehow, standing there beside my best friend, I knew this wasn't the end of the story. It was just the beginning.